Welcome to McIntyre Celebrating Families Week 2024. This is our third short film of this week that we are myself, Nicola Payne, and welcoming Debs.
Hello, and thank you for having me.
And the purpose of this week is that we are hopefully going to help you with some information around different elements of McIntyre. So today's focus is our cohort of people, so our young provision, No Limits, and some of the things that families that have their loved ones accessing that kind of world of sort of 19 to 25-year-old young people, children, your loved ones. And today we're going to have a little focus on that. So I just, if you haven't heard of No Limits is our McIntyre's sort of young person leading into adulthood provision, and it's a way of accessing learning in the community. So and I've seen so many young people that are part of No Limits just flourish with this, and they build their own curriculum really, and they access that in ways that make sense to them. So they're not, that person isn't behind a desk in a classroom. They're learning in environments that they're comfortable in. We've got so much more information on our website around No Limits, but today we're just going to think about with Debs around independence and how that can change at this time, and how we need to acknowledge and respect that really.
Yeah, it's a challenge. I think when you're a parent carer, you do so much more. And this isn't, and I'm not being derogatory to parents who don't have children with SEND, but you're so involved in every single little aspect, and you make so many decisions and so many choices. One of the things we found that made it a little bit easier was we've been firm believers that we had to give our children choices, and they were allowed to say no. Because from a safeguarding perspective, if you've always made choices and decisions and your child has never had the power to say no and have that recognised, it creates some issues in itself. So we've always been big on giving them certain level of independence so we've also had that throughout the plan as well. So it would be things like, for example, we knew there was a young boy that we all adored, but he'd worked out that came and do anything anyone asked him, and it was always like, oh yeah, okay, you just get me this, okay, you get me that. And so we actually set it as one of his goals, and one of his outcomes was that he would be able to say no to this young boy, in a way that didn't cause any friction, but also he had the autonomy to say no. And we've been really big on that. So, even like visits, once they got sort of into like mid-teens, but like 14, 15, if we were going to go and visit family, we would say to them, it's up to you. Because I'm thinking, do you know what? When I was 14, 15, I didn't have to go. If my parents were going visiting my gran, that was my choice. And so we was like, okay, so you have a choice. And if they didn't, that would mean us having to change things so that an adult could stay with them. But it was about giving them choices. And if you start that from an earlier age, it makes it a little bit easier, because you've sort of started to give them a little bit of autonomy. But it's a really important thing, because from a safeguarding perspective, but also it's the whole, like, in the community, where if they're vulnerable, but they've not learnt to say no and have it respected, or if they've not learnt how to sort of say no without it being rude or sort of confrontational, so it can be a challenge, but it's one of those things that's so important. And
I completely agree there. Before my role within our health and families team at McIntyre, I was a support worker for many, many years, Debs, and I knew when someone was just agreeing with me because they were worried that if they had another opinion, and you know, that would be compromising, so they would just say yes, and you'd think, you know, that's not, you know, you want it. So the more you nurtured and spent time with that person to go, it's okay to disagree with me. You know, I don't want you to agree with me because that's what you feel you should do. And I think that's ongoing work for, so, you know, dependent on how that's been in their childhood. I think if it's something that they, you know, you're doing with your children or young people, you know, you're advocating for that choice and independence. But if that's something that person isn't used to, it can be really alien.
Yeah, and you know, the level of independence my children will have will be very different between themselves, and that's something that we're aware of as well. So we, you know, one of our children, we're very aware that he will probably be much more reliant on others, and so we do a lot about with him. It's not just about the independence and control; it's about relationships, and also talking a lot about compromise and two-way relationships, and it's not just give, and you know, I'm thinking about giving them an idea of what work looks like, and how sometimes there's things you have to do whether you want to do them or not. You know, unload the dishwasher. You know, there are times it's the equivalent of asking them to go down the mine, and mine for 4 shifts back to back, and all I've done is say, can you empty the dishwasher? You know, but even sometimes like, can you pick up that pair of pants? It's like, but it's also making, we talk, as they got a bit older, we talked about work, and you know, that you have to be there for a certain time, and you have to do certain bits that you really don't really enjoy. And yes, I know there's that whole fantasy about, you know, if you love the work you do, it won't feel like work. It will. I love what I do, but you know what, it's still work. And that's another thing, we're realistic with them. And so it's about that, even, it's about trying to treat them age appropriate, because that will be different for everyone, but it's about being honest and about reality. And looking at, you know, when we are looking at employment, it's looking at what the options are, and you know, how does that look if they need a lot of support.
And I know, I'm very aware, and I haven't got the rich information that I would have if I worked for No Limits, but I know students at No Limits have work experience opportunity, which allows them to then sort of just dip their toes into different waters to go, actually, this is something I really am interested in. You start that little journey and go, actually, this really isn't for me. So I think that's really important, isn't it? That sort of transitioning into that world of work. It's a nice way of doing that, and absolutely is an opportunity for anyone to have that. I remember, I'm sure you and I, you know, we both remember our work experience days, and you know, it makes you really think what the real world can feel like and what's expected of you as well, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's a real sort of like change as well as to where you're going to work and what's expected of you, and how different companies and organizations have different expectations. And what we've always said to the kids is thinking about each tutor you have and each teacher, that in theory should have had exactly the same expectations and requirements from you, but each one of them was different, and the way they treated you was different. So that's how we've sort of like give them something they can compare it to. You know, we know some of the teachers who've been absolutely amazing, and we know other teachers who have been appalling, would be a polite way of saying it. And so we talk about that as well, and we talk about keeping it real. But yeah, I think the independence, and you know, but what we all want is, you know, at some point for them to have some form of not being reliant on us. And it's hard to let go, but actually it's actually quite nice at the same time, because it gives you suddenly that little tiny gaps of space that you didn't have. And now I'm at a point where, you know, I still do so much for them. I still take them to college, I still collect them, I still go to all the meetings, but like I said, I'm helping them to do the emails to say what they're struggling with themselves, and the next time they'll have an idea of what to say, and maybe they just want me to look it over, or and it's about that gradual sort of like, doing it bit by bit by bit to point where they don't need me to do that letter. I will still do the letter and I will still check it.
I knew that was coming.
I am mum. It is really hard. But I am trying to see the positives in it.
And it's building, isn't it, as well, for a family, for parents that are watching or listening to us today. It's building that relationship with the team as well, isn't it? And we keep going back to our video one. If you are watching these videos in order, we spoke right at the beginning of the week about person-centered thinking tools. The more each service, or the area of support, so McIntyre, we're talking about No Limits today, the more No Limits knows about you as a family, the more that can help as well, I believe. And yeah, I think that's a really important message to share.
No, I think if we can start earlier on and start off with the ability to say no, expected, then gradually it's small steps, but by the time they get to here, it's a bit easier to let go. And actually it's a real pride. I have a real pride when one of them says no to somebody, and tells me, and I said no because I didn't think that was the right thing, and it's like, and that wasn't what I wanted to do, and that's, I just feel like, okay, my job's done.
So. And, you sharing that thought, I had an experience recently where I was working or supporting a person to make a decision about employment, and I knew that her time within the role that she was doing had come to an end for her. She'd grown, but I had to go and have a conversation with her around a contractual change, and I thought she's just going to agree with me here, and I'm going to be stuck right back at the beginning of knowing she really is outgrown this role, and she's doing what, she's a dancer now, she's moved on in life. And she actually was, and we had the contract there, and we went through it in a really sort of accessible way that made sense to her. And I thought, she's going to just say yes because she's used to saying yes to me. And she said no. And it was the most powerful. And I've known this woman for so many years. And I thought, part of me broke inside because I didn't want her not to work with me anymore. But I let that was hidden. But I was, she went, no, Nick, I don't want to do this anymore. I want to do that. And I was just like, yes, you go, because that is what you should have the confidence to do. And that's what it's all about.
Yeah, absolutely.
It takes sometimes a bit of a winding road to get there.
Yeah, absolutely. It is, it's hard work, but it is a real feeling of pride when they do it.
Yeah.
It's one of those, isn't it, where you sort of like, sometimes it'd be easier if they just did everything that you wanted them to. But I always think, you know what, there's not a teenager in this world who does everything that their parents want them to do. And that's the reality.
Thank you. Thanks, Debs. And again, if you're listening to this short film, we hope you found it useful. Again, very small conversation about, we know it's such a minefield, but just taking into consideration some of the things that Debs has shared will help you. And again, if you've got any further questions, just get in touch. This is just the start of a conversation. And if you feel there's a need of this to be a wider conversation, myself and Debs are absolutely here to support that. So if you do want to get in touch with me, my name is Nicola and I work for McIntyre, nicola.payne@mcintyrecharity.org. And any questions you have for Debs, I will absolutely pass on. So thank you, Debs, as always, and thanks for taking the time to listen.